to be in this place in my mind anymore. I didn't want to be in this place in my heart and my soul anymore. I just didn't. And I felt like the business would be a you know a saving grace to that. Weight loss would be a saving grace to that. More friends, a better relationship, he was my fiance at the time, but my husband, all of the things, right, would just get me away from my brain. But one of the things I want y'all to know is you can't take a vacation from your brain, baby. You can't. And so that's the reason why we have to start seeing our situations differently, right? All right. All right. So we are back again. And this week we are going over the building before the breakthrough, right? And in this in this series, it's a 10-week series. We're in week number one. This is session number two. And we are stopping calling our season delay, and we are recognizing it for the development. Right, the development. I remember, and I talked about this in one of our other recordings, but I remember it was right after having my baby, and I was um in a therapy session, and I was telling her, man, like, I'm worried. I'm worried that I'm not gonna get this baby weight off and all of the things, right? And some of my concern really came from previously my first pregnancy. I had gained a lot of weight with my baby, and I felt like my baby weight is the reason why I had ended up divorced, right? And so in this one, I'm freaking out, and and she was like, well, when did you have the baby? Because I remember you not, being pregnant not too long ago. And I was like, 6 weeks. She was like, whoa, 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 whoa. We're not even going to talk about, have you even been released from the doctor yet? Right. And it was that realization of really slowing down and not putting so much pressure on myself. How could I? And I was thinking about the business then. I was thinking about all of the things because I was just in a place where I didn't want to be in this place in my mind anymore. I didn't want to be in this place in my heart and my soul anymore. I just didn't. And I felt like the business would be a you know a saving grace to that. Weight loss would be a saving grace to that. More friends, a better relationship, he was my fiance at the time, but my husband, all of the things, right, would just get me away from my brain. But one of the things I want y'all to know is you can't take a vacation from your brain, baby. You can't. And so that's the reason why we have to start seeing our situations differently, right? And last session we talked about what you're focusing on, right? If you focus on the bad stuff, then you're going to get the bad stuff, right? But we can look at that same season, and that's why I feel like the Bible says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all of the things will start to be added on to you. And the reason being is because when I really sat down and said, God, I cannot take it. I cannot take this. I feel like I am losing my mind some days because, I know my expectations of myself are high, but where is that need coming from? Why do I feel like I have to be the it for everyone, and almost like a doormat, almost like a dumping post, almost like, you know I'm the one that everyone has to come to. I'm the one. What is that? What is that, God? What is going on? And, at the end of the day, I complain about it because I feel like the dumping post. I feel like the doorman. I feel like, all of the things. And so, he told me to consider your lens, consider your perspective. And that's what we are going over today. And so we are going to jump right back into it. And, the same season can bring a different view. Delay says, I am behind. God forgot about me. Nothing is working. But development says, God is forming capacity before he releases more. And so the same season can feel different when you stop asking only what is missing and begin asking, what is God building? And I feel like this is really the pivot, right? This is when you become CEO. And why do you say that, Denisha? Why does this pivot when you become the CEO? Because in your business, you're gonna forever be building stuff. You're gonna forever be, continuous improvement, all of that. So even large corporations, they're still, when you see new logos and new this, because they're still working on stuff, right? But instead of seeing, what I don't have, what's not in my hand, what's not in my resources, what is God building with what I do have, right? And so in that same conversation with the therapist, she says, so you know what we're gonna do? Every day we're gonna put on shoes. That's all. That's your win. Putting on shoes is your win. And that started a journey because I was like, I can do that. And so I did start to put on my shoes. And then I did start to walk. And even though my focus didn't remain strictly on like the weight loss and all that stuff, we're still in that journey. We're still, doing the things, right? But it trickled down to other aspects of life because instead of expecting for myself to, you know, put out a bunch of content and just have everything, you know, and get this business going and, full speed ahead and all of that stuff, it let me know just do one video. And then after one, do two. And after two, do three. And then I started to think and debunk when it comes to that's another reason why we talked about that before, why comparison is dangerous, because you're looking at content from people who's been doing this for years and posting for years. Like a year from now, if you're consistently posting content every week, even if you do one piece of content every week for a year, it's 56 weeks in a year, you'll have 56 pieces of content. And so when you see these content creators where it seems like they're constantly on online, or their stories is always popping, they always have something, they have content because they've had content. They've had time, right? You might be looking at them, 6 7 years in the game. What's 56 times 7? Don't judge me because I don't I need to stop asking these questions because that's 392 pieces of content. So, over time, once you have your library of 392 pieces of content, then of course you can get to a place where you just recycle stuff because the new people that come to your page, they haven't seen that content. So all of the content is brand new to them. So you're just recycling stuff. So where do I need to ask God for a new lens? What you keep looking at will shape your beliefs. We want to stop and say thank you for watching. Becoming Her is your entrepreneurship development community, giving emerging entrepreneurs the know how and practical how to for building with confidence. Since you're here, we know you're ready for your next step. So visit our website, join your tribe, and claim your free resources. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And you can shop the merch, schedule your next step session, support the mission, and share this with another woman ready to build. Let's keep becoming together. If I believed, continued to believe, because in that season and that time, I felt defeated. I felt defeated. I looked defeated. I was defeated. I felt like a victim. I looked like the victim. I was a victim. I felt like my life was out of control. My life was out of control. I knew it was out of control. Other people knew it was out of control. And what's so crazy is I was in a better situation, quote unquote, um, financially or career wise than I was when I really started to do my content and stuff. Because when I really, started to uh do the entrepreneur thing, I didn't have a job. I didn't have I didn't have no contracts. I didn't have anything. I didn't have anything. Living with my parents. Didn't have nothing, but was at peace because of the perspective that changed, because I looked at my life differently and stopped looking at what I didn't have and using that as my restrictions and started using what I didn't have as a resource. Do you know? Looking at what I didn't have as a resource, I found all of the stuff that I was going to pay for. I was going to pay for about four different platforms where at the end of it it would have cost like $120 a month, right? Where I didn't have the money to pay for it. But the job still needed to be done. So I'm like, Lord, what do we do? And he told me, look at this. And then I looked at that. And when I really started to optimize one platform, it did everything that those four different platforms did. Now, did some of it take a little longer? Yeah. But that's fine. I have the time. I'm doing it anyway. Right? So now even when the money starts to be money and the 120 is a dime a dozen, I still don't have to use that because I found a more resourceful way. And so what you don't have sometimes is really your superpower. Man, what you don't have sometimes is really your superpower. You are where you are for a reason. Your family is your family for a reason. So focus does not always change the facts, but it changes the weight that those facts carry in your heart. If I continue to look at, man, I don't have the money for the software I need to do what I got to do, I wouldn't have one video up and I'd still be in a situation. But the focus changing, what you give your attention to grows in influence. So I just say, look again. The enemy's strategy is to keep your eyes on what is missing, delayed or hard, then convince you that that is the whole story. And it's not. It's not the whole story. God's intention is to look at his presence, his promises, and his provision. God is often working before the evidence feels obvious, which he is. And, an amazing business partner. God will always be the best business partner that you will ever have. So, where do I need to ask God for a new lens? What is it in my life right now, today, that I am calling lack that is actually an opportunity to allow God in to see where I could be resourceful in that, you know? The very thing. And then not only just be resourceful in it, but like the very thing sometimes that we feel like is not significant. I had a associate one time. And she's like, yeah, people always be asking me, and she started a whole business. out of this, like a whole business that's flourishing out of this. But she was like, yeah, people always ask me about my chocolate chip cookies, and I just be like, I'll be making cookies. I like chocolate chip cookies, and so I make chocolate chip cookies, and people was like telling me that I should sell them. And this was a perfect example of the story in the Bible, um, where the lady's like, I don't have nothing. We about to die. Oh my God. Or Hagar. There we go. Hagar. Hagar sitting there in the wilderness crying, and she put the baby to the side, and she like, I don't wanna watch him die for starvation. And God's like, look, you got a whole well next to you. This is so much in that to unpack. But OMG. But she looks, it's a whole well. You ain't gonna starve, girl. And so I say that to say the very thing, because my associate at the time, she was unemployed, and so she just one day felt like baking some cookies, and so she baked some cookies, and the cookies definitely were amazing. And then took them to church, and somebody was like, man, you should think about selling these. And then now got a whole business around selling cookies, because the resourcefulness, and didn't have the money to do all of the fancy stuff. The simple ingredients that she already had in her house. Come on, y'all. She started a whole business around it. And so we have to think about what it is that we are thinking about. We just do. So that's it for this time, and we'll see you in the next session.